Good morning. I think the second round would be much better. I have sugar and caffeine in me, so I had a hard time coping with my words earlier today as getting out of losing an hour on my... my phone had to tell me that the time had changed. So, but anyways, I wanted to thank you all for the opportunity to inviting me and speaking to your congregation, and Pastor Brad as well, and Dara for allowing me to speak on what my faith means to me, a little bit of the background of my life as a Muslim in America, and also how our faiths, the two faiths, are interconnected in many ways. I think I just want to kind of start with my own personal venture in the United States. I came here as a child. I was 5 years old, from the country Pakistan. My parents are from Pakistan. And originally my dad came to study here. He was studying microbiology as a graduate program in the University of Connecticut. And later on he invited his family, and at that time it was just me and my sister. And so we came here as immigrants. I don't remember a lot in my earlier childhood when I was in Pakistan, but whatever life that I've lived in the United States, I remember a lot of that. So in the beginning, I remember the struggles that we faced as immigrants, language, culture, understanding and inclusion and cohesion, all of those things that come to play when you're trying to build a new life in another part of the world. And what happened was that when we came here, we had to, as immigrants, we had to seek asylum, which is basically a term that is an immigration term that is used by people who claim to want to permanently stay in a nation whereby if they go back to where they came from, their security would be harmed in some way or form. Our community, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community that I represent, is heavily persecuted in Pakistan, and at that time the situation was even more dire, and we were facing many different kinds of governmental intrusions on our freedom of religion. So most of us, a lot of our members had migrated over to different countries throughout the world, mostly Western nations. And sadly to say, because of the fact that Western nations were the ones that were offering something that Islam had already given Muslims 1400 years ago, which was the freedom of speech and freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. And that thing that now I know my faith fully supports, it's amazing to me that my country of origin doesn't know or believe in that. So from that standpoint, my life started here and my family, and ever since then up to now, it's been a journey of learning new things and creating a new culture, accepting a new culture, and including myself in that culture. And now that I'm a citizen of the United States of America, I feel privileged and at the same time blessed that I can openly go out and use the right of freedom of speech and my right to believe in what I want to believe, in the faith I want to believe in, openly without being persecuted and without have any legal repercussions. So that's a little bit of my background. Now a background of my community. So I hope this is better. The community that I belong to is called the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And the founder of this community, his name was Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. He was the founder, plus he is the original spiritual leader of this community. And he lived in a town called Qadian, India. In the time when India was one country, actually, and there was no Pakistan. So the country that I'm from was actually part of the greater India. And at that time, the founder of the community basically founded the principles or the foundation of this community was built on the principles of true Islam, the Islam that we believe that Prophet Muhammad, who was the founder of Islam, had created this religion, which was the tenets of peace. And the way that we describe peace is in two ways. First, we serve God directly. This is a personal connection that we create within ourselves, individually with God, prayers, belief, effort. And then the second part to that is serving humanity. And those two are intrinsically related because serving humanity, in essence, in our belief, is also serving God. So when we serve each other, we make sure we look out for each other, basically, in the sense. So the principles and the foundation of our community are resting on these two things. And from that standpoint, we know that when we follow these principles, we can create a much more peaceful world around us. So from the creation, the genesis of the Ahmadi Muslim community, which was in 1889, all the way up to now, we are spread across 209 nations of the world. And in the United States alone, we have over 78 different chapters. And my chapter that I belong to is in Oshkosh. Our mosque is located right across from West High School. You've probably seen it when you've been by. It was actually a funeral home before. And so it kind of turned a place of the dead into the place of the living. And we have renovated quite a bit, so it's not what it was. So if you ever had the chance, it's we always have an open invitation for anybody who would like to come and just observe and check out our mosque. So our motto for peace is to serve humanity. And one of the biggest nonprofit organizations that we work through is our Humanity First organization. And recently we had a Humanity First International Conference in UK. And some of the projects I can kind of tell you that we're doing or involved in is amazing to me. We are building hospitals in areas of the world like Guatemala or rural areas of Mexico and South America and Africa where there was no medical care at all. And not just a hospital, but the latest cutting-edge material and Medicare and medical care. And from that, we have other projects, Water for Life, that we started in Africa and now are continuing in rural parts of India to create wells in different villages and communities that do not have water at all, or if they do, it's not clean water, and they have to travel miles to acquire this water. And we are creating wells for them with filtration systems, and they've never had that before. And then we have projects that are providing sustainable energy in African villages that didn't have electricity at all, and now they have solar energy. So those kinds of projects are sort of like the taste of what our community is trying to do throughout the world. And not just throughout the world, but in the United States during disaster relief through all the 3 different hurricanes we were there. We served over 25,000 different people during those disasters, providing relief and resources. So our community, by resources standard, is not that large, but the effort we try to do with our own personal labor and volunteership is more than enough that any money could not replace. So our community, alongside other communities, are trying to build that better future. And those are the kind of interconnected faith-based initiatives that we're always involved in. Now, just a little bit of background what we believe true Islam is. The founder of Islam is Prophet Muhammad, and unquestionably, we as the Ahmadi Muslim community are under the guidance of this man, Prophet Muhammad. And I say prophet because we believe him to be a prophet of God. People have this misconception, and I include Muslims sometimes, that Prophet Muhammad was a person who dissuaded the idea that other faiths or other belief systems should be looked down upon, and they should be ostracized in societies, or even a level above, extreme level above that, persecution, God forbid. But Islam is far from that, and his example is a perfect example to show. In the beginning, he would invite Christians into his mosque to pray. He did not have any reservations on those. Christians came to him, and they were open. It was an open invitation to his personal mosque, and they had open debates with him about religion and faith without any, I would say, threat of violence or threat to their life or liberty. And they had an open invitation to living in a Muslim society. And one of the first earliest decisions that Prophet Muhammad made that actually affected both Muslims and Christians was in a time where Muslims were actually being persecuted by other people. This was an early period in Islamic history, and it was where Muslims were weaker, obviously, from the standpoint of numbers and also the standpoint of public policy. And the Muslims were severely being persecuted. So the Muslims came to the Prophet Muhammad and asked, now we're being physically persecuted, and some of us are dying and being killed. So what do you recommend us to do? So he basically said that if you want to leave this area to a better place, I would recommend you to go to a just Christian king in the civilization of Abyssinia at that time. And his name was King Negus. So Muslims traveled abroad and they went to King Negus. And King Negus was in actuality was a very good and just king. And he accepted them as refugees. So Muslims, one of the first earliest Muslim refugees, were accepted by a Christian king in his nation. And when they first came, he heard their case himself personally, and he understood what was going on. And then he was a just king, so he also invited the counterpoint, the people who were persecuting them, and heard from them and said, what is this about? And he heard their story. In the end, he said that I accept them as refugees and I believe that they are truly being persecuted. And then he wanted the Muslims to recite a portion of the Quran, which is the holy book that Muslims read, like the Bible is the holy book for the Christians. And the Muslim at the time, he started to read a chapter called Mary, chapter Mary. And this is chapter 19 in the Quran, if you ever wanted to read the chapter Mary. And the Christian king started to cry, and he said that this is how I imagined Mary to be. So the Quran is full of different anecdotes of Mary and then of Jesus in many different places, and describes Jesus as with the most highest respect in the most revered way. And the Christian king was impressed by all of this, and he accepted them. So that was one of the first, I would say, interfaith relationship between Muslims and Christians. And then later on, when Muslims were slowly coming to power in the sense of public policy and societal, governmental positions and stuff like that, Prophet Muhammad wrote a letter. This was a time when it was the latter portion of his life, and he wrote a letter to the Saint Catherine's monastery. And the letter contains specific things about how Muslims should protect the rights of Christians. Very specific. I highly encourage you to go online and Google this, the letter to Saint Catherine's monastery. And it's very specific of how the Muslims should actually value the life of the Christians even more than the Muslims themselves. And kind of interrelate with that value and the founder of the community of the Ahmadi Muslim community, our founder actually said, even if your neighbor is a Christian, Hindu, or a Sikh, in the Sikh or is a community in India, that even if they are a Christian, Hindu, or Sikh members and their house is on fire and you don't go and protect them and put out the fire, you do not belong in my community, because it goes against the tenet of Islam. This is the truth of what Islam taught in the principles and guiding light of Prophet Muhammad when he wrote the letter to Saint Catherine's monastery. And throughout his life, he always encouraged Muslims to not disrespect the respected figures of Christianity or their respected figures in their holy books. As Muslims, we are encouraged to believe in all of the prophets that have ever come in all places, regardless of whatever faith they belong to. So for us, Jesus is very revered in a different way, but nonetheless very revered. In fact, when we say his name, we say peace be on him, just like we say peace be on him to Prophet Muhammad as well. So our sense of respect is very clear on these issues of Jesus Christ. And Mary as well. We believe the idea that women are able to receive revelation. So Mary's status to us is almost like a prophet, even though she's not called a prophet in the Quran or not, but her status is revered like a prophet status. She was a person who also was in direct contact with God. So women and men are equal in that sense, in the spiritual sense as well, that they're equally able to be the state of revelation and state of communication with God. So in conclusion, I think what the world needs to know is that there are a lot of hate groups out there that have contorted their ideas to what their specific desires are, and they have basically treaded far away from these holy books, the Bible or the Quran, and they've misused that guidance for their own personal purposes. And they're ignorant about their own holy books. In fact, I was just in conversation, the hate groups that quote or misquote the Quran in the United States, at least they're quoting the Quran. The hate groups that are Muslims out there, they can't even quote the Bible. So they don't have any knowledge of Christianity. So these are the kinds of groups. And I would even think that they have a hard time quoting their own Quran, knowing that they don't know anything about their own book. So the hate groups are vile, and their education is putrid in the sense that they're just trying to seek specific things that are politically related, and they're trying to divide the world in their own ideological ways. So our community's best weapon against that is the weapon of best arguments and our best actions, which means good works. And when we talk to each other, like the way I'm talking to you right now, and then more than welcome for you to come to our mosque and talk to us. We have regular coffee cake sessions every Tuesday, 6 p.m. that we allow the community members from the outside to come and talk to us, ask us questions about Islam, or they can even talk about their faith and let us be knowledgeable about what you believe in. So it allows that dialogue to take place and to build that understanding and tolerance. And I think lastly, I want to kind of encourage all of us to look at a new vision of the world where we are working together, because it will encourage our youth, who will be the ones who will lead this nation for tomorrow, and hopefully a better way than what we're doing right now. And the only way that can happen is if our example becomes that reference for them to follow. And there's a saying in one of our spiritual leaders in our community. He said that reformation of a nation can only begin when you have reformation of your youth. And that is true, because once they know the guiding principles of how they would carry out themselves in their lives, then they can better lead their nation at that time. So I think I have a hopeful vision of the future of the United States of America being a citizen of this country, this great nation, and also that my faith allows me to be loyal to this nation in every way possible, whether it's serving the community like the way that I usually do in my own way through my community, or serving the nation, meaning I take part being a civil servant, or in some way serving the military in other ways. I have a cousin who has valiantly served the U.S. Navy for many, many years, and now he was honorably discharged, and he served his country, and he did it with pride, because he knows that his faith is not contradicting his values of serving his nation. So with that, I think thank you very much again for inviting me and allowing me to speak and communicating with you all in this way. Thank you.